Hey, what's up, you guys? Bloody Jacob here to give you my thoughts on Friday the 13th, Part 3, 3D. Now, I gave you my thoughts on Part 2 just the other day, and continuing along with that, ironically, we're at Part 3, and I say ironically because I used to strongly prefer Part 3 to Part 2. It used to be one of my favorites of the franchise, actually. And over time, I've gotten to definitely prefer Part 2, and that's really gone up in the entries for me. Part 3 is one of my favorites. It's one I still like. It's one I think is a little overlooked itself. But, as I've watched it over the years, it's not quite hitting as much as it used to for me. But I still enjoy it. And with that, we have the whole 3D gimmick, which kind of took over a lot of the production of this movie. I even read about one of the screenwriters talking about how them pushing that gimmick and getting certain shots for it to work with it was essentially a focus over anything else in the movie. That, along with being very even more straightforward about casting for looks over talent and that sort of deal. Not that Friday the 13th isn't notorious, for getting good-looking women to, strip or whatever, but apparently even more so with this one. It's one I still like a lot, though, and it's one that's still iconic within the franchise. It's the first time Jason Voorhees wears the hockey mask. And you do have some despite what I said about the casting and everything, you do have a decent set of characters, at least a decent set of actors in this movie. Dana Kimmel as our lead Chris is one of the more decent, final girls per se within the films of the franchise. You also have Larry Zerner as Shelley, who Jason ends up getting the hockey mask from. He's entertaining if a bit frustrating. You also have Paul Kratka as well as some hippie characters who end up hanging out with the group. So not like the dullest bunch. They're at least somewhat lively to make, before the kills start, enjoyable enough. And then you have the aspect of the biker gang coming after him and trying to burn the farm down. And of course, they end up running into Jason themselves. And always remember the pitchfork handle just sticking out of the guy's chest. And story-wise, you do have the aspect. And story-wise, you do have the aspect of our lead Chris character having a trauma with running with Jason within the woods when she was a bit younger. This would have worked much better if they had brought back Amy Steele's character Jenny from Part 2 and just played on the events of that film. But she didn't end up being a part of this movie, unfortunately, so I think they kind of just carried over some of that aspect into what it would have been for Jenny. Although they were planning on apparently a hospital movie if it involved Jenny as well, which I think would have been a bit too much like Halloween 2. And I don't really think a hospital setting for the entire film fits Friday really as much. But again, Dana Kimmel doesn't do a bad job. You do still have some pretty memorable kills in here with the harpoon gun after Jason gets his mask. You have the head squish with the eyeball popping out, which is one of the better 3D shots. And that brings me to Jason himself. And with that, we have Richard Brooker playing him in this one, and I do think, as much as I really, really dig Part 2, that Richard Brooker sort of improves upon what Steve Dash and Warrington Gillette did in 2. I think he does a good job physically as Jason, and I really, really like the makeup and the look of Jason under the mask in this. NECA did a figure that's just dead on for it. And just the whole fact that the hockey mask was essentially not an accident, but someone who worked on the film just happening to be a hockey fan. They tried it out. It was too small, I think, for either Richard Brooker's head or just the prosthetics he was wearing. So they ended up making this mold specifically for his face, and then lo and behold, we have the hockey mask, which has just become iconic in horror. But yeah, so although I've grown a bit more lukewarm on this one, there is still some memorable moments to it. The cast is halfway decent. And then even when Chris attempts to hang Jason, it's pretty cool. So it kind of kicks in and gets out of that. And then when the axe goes through his head and he's still kind of walking towards her. So I think it's still a film of the franchise that deserves a bit more credit than it's usually given. If I'd rate, I'd give it a C+, B-, somewhere in there. Let me guys think about it. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, of course, and Twitter. Peace.